All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Darrow webinar. Um, let's give it a few more seconds. I still see people joining. It's wonderful to see familiar names as well as new names. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Um, so I'm going to slowly start and say that we are here today to discuss legal tech solutions and the core principles to evaluate and decide on the tech stack that you use. My name is Amit Shemesh, and I'm going to be your MC for today. And I think that we can start. So I'll start off by introducing our speakers for today. I'm with my wonderful colleagues, Zachary and Lior. I'll start off by introducing Zach, who is our Director of Solution Architecture. Zach has vast experience in the legal tech world, and he's worked on many different AI solutions with big organizations. So banks and other big corporations, as well as the actual providers in legal tech and understanding the solutions at hand. And Lior Magan, who's our data science team lead, who is at the Tel Aviv offices working with our data team on building the solutions and the tools that help our partners um, discover, assess, and address legal risk in a way that promotes their activity. So before we dive in and before I hand over to our actual speakers, I'd love to give you an overview of the legal tech market as it is today. This graph might look familiar to some of you. It shows where we are today and what's the forecast for the legal tech market. Um, and so we're going to double in size. In 10 years from now, the market is forecasted to be $65 billion. And the main driver behind this big leap is generative AI and the expansion of artificial intelligence that is really all around us. And the legal community is not immune to it. So just, I'm assuming that everyone on this webinar is using AI. Uh, if you don't actively use it, then when you're ordering pasta on Amazon or just Googling anything, you're using AI. And there are many solutions that are tailored to the legal market, and this is what we're seeing in this graph. And then in terms of adoption, we're talking about a crazy jump from 19 to 79% from 2023 to 24. And I think that speaks to many of us, myself included, because of everything that we've seen with the different GPTs that are around us. And from a very niche sort of experimental landscape, it's definitely a must. And the question is not, am I using AI? It's what AI am I using? And does it support my goal? And with that question, I'm very happy to hand over to our first speaker. Zach, take it away.
Thanks, Amit. Definitely really interesting times in the industry. I'm Zach Foreman. I'm the Director of Solution Architecture here at Darrow. And I spent about the past 10 years prior to my coming to Darrow working at the intersection of law and AI, largely focused on contracts, but also just generally how to use legal data to improve how legal professionals operate. It's been an interesting decade. I think about 10 years ago when I came into this, there was a very uneasy relationship between lawyers and technology. The legal industry has kind of been not on the forefront of a lot of the legal development or a lot of the technology developments over the past few decades. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One of the main ones is that lawyers are by nature somewhat conservative, and that's a good thing. Lawyers need to be careful and thoughtful about managing risk. So this kind of move fast and break things type attitude that can be pretty common throughout the rest of the throughout technology really doesn't work that well in the legal industry. But there's another reason for it, which is structural, which is that lawyers work in words and lawyers work in text. And up until very recently, technology really hadn't caught up to the ability to manage legal data in the form of words um, in a way that was sufficiently nuanced to actually make major changes in the industry. And I think we've all seen over the past couple of years that that's changed, um, that the advent of large language models, the advent of, chat GPTs of the world have really made it go from an environment where it was extremely expensive and it really limited in the use cases that you could bring to the market in law, to something where the world is really open and there's a lot of promise. And so this is kind of exciting because this is a very different webinar than I would be able to have given even 2 or 3 years ago on the topic, because the technology has really kind of started to catch up and be pretty promising in terms of what we can and can't do. But we are in a situation now where I think a lot of the legal industry is a little bit behind other industries in terms of its maturity and how it adopts technology. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time today talking about practical tips for how you actually can think about adopting new technologies and doing so in a way that's successful for you and your firm. So first off, you probably think step one, we got to figure out what solutions we're actually going to start implementing, what technology we're going to do. And I think that's a pretty common approach, but I do think that it's putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because there really is a step zero of figuring out your problem. It's pretty critical to be problem oriented, to be looking around and saying, what is it that what is bogging down my firm? What are the tasks that could be automated that aren't? And what are the most valuable ways that we can actually solve that? And I think there's a couple of different things that I would keep in mind here. So the first that I already mentioned is just identifying the sources of friction in your firm. And that's being, listening to your teammates, listening to, like, paying attention to your own experience, to just see where are things getting bogged down, where are people doing a lot of manual work, especially manual work at some scale. The second is really making sure that you're clearly defining the problem, whether that's, okay, we're spending too much time on specific document reviews, or, we're reading the news constantly or doing legal research in a way where we're just Googling things left and right without really clear path to how we're going to manage this. So as long as you define the problem extremely clearly, I think you're on the right path there. One heuristic I kind of use for that, and I genuinely do use this in my day-to-day life, is if I can explain it to my mom, who is a retired math professor who last worked in the private sector and in time that she probably doesn't want me to say the decade, then I think I'm defining the problem clearly enough to actually start thinking about how do we solve it. And then the third step of that is quantification. So do you know how this is actually going to translate to the value to money for your firm or for your company? And this is a really critical one because it's the only way that you can really balance what specific problems do we need to solve, what can we leave behind, or what can we kind of live with? Because you need to be able to assess what are the most important things. And the best way to do that is to actually turn it into dollars and cents as rigorously in as disciplined a way as possible so that you can make intelligent decisions there. There's another consideration that's kind of brought on by the advent of large language models, which is kind of the so-called agentic AI, which is really an AI that sort of takes action to solve problems for you somewhat proactively. And there's kind of a fundamental question there that I think is different for everyone who has different risk tolerances. But the result of agentic AI is that it can actually, in some places, replace human judgment. And so you need to be really thoughtful as you're looking at AI solutions. Where do I feel comfortable actually allowing this to make judgments that I'm not going to necessarily see? And Lior will talk a little bit about some applications of agentic AI and research tools that we're able to use. But it's a really critical question, and one that I think you need to think about proactively when you're assessing each individual tool and each individual problem that you're facing. Then you get to the step one, which is finding the solution itself. And here as you're like looking through the possible solutions, looking at tech vendors, talking to them, all that kind of stuff, I would be thinking about three things, which is first off, your people, which includes things like how open are they to new technologies? How capable are they of adopting new technologies? How tech forward are they? Second is your processes. So where and how do our processes need to change in order to enhance or enable this new solution to actually have the value that we expect it to have? And third is your existing technology stack. And that really is anything, your laptops, Microsoft Word, all the way up to kind of more specific software to your own team. How does this fit into our entire technology stack? Where does it need to plug in? Where can we deal with like not a perfect integration? All of that kind of stuff. It's a really critical process to kind of go through all three of those and think really critically about, is this solution going to function across those three components? Once you've then found your solution, there is generally a three phases, I think of it, in terms of how you're actually implementing that. And I'll say a little bit here. This is where I think a lot of technology solution implementations go off the rails. And what I've seen is at each of these three stages. Um, on the first one, the detailed design stage. So every technology that you sign up for is going to have some customization that's going to need to take place to match what the work that you do specifically and the nuances of your own firm. And it's so critical at this stage that you feel ownership over the solution. It's not something that you can just outsource to a vendor to have them take it on. The second is then in the configuration, because configuration is when the vendor is actually taking the design requirements that you work together on and configuring them into a specific framework that is for your firm. And that's where every implementation is going to run into problems. You're going to see things that don't work quite the way they take place. You're going to find out that processes that you thought you understood maybe don't react as well when you try to enable them with technology. So it's really important here to go in knowing that implementation is going to be rocky and really stay flexible and really work with vendors as a team to solve some of the issues that are going to come up in configuration. And then there's a launch phase. And the launch phase is where you're actually turning on the solution. You're starting to use it. And sometimes this is a really short process. Sometimes this is a really long process. But every time that I've seen, the number one barrier to adoption is communication here. So you've already designed it, you've already configured it, you've solved and thought through a lot of these problems. This is where you end up needing to communicate to your teammates and make sure that there's a two-way street of communication, whether that's, weekly meetings and office hours or large scale kind of emails out to the entire firm. It sort of depends on the scale a little bit, but communication needs to be a key work stream just to make sure that everyone knows what's expected of them and what's going to change. A quick adoption tip on this front. I highly recommend, as you're planning your configuration and launch, to identify early who the champions of a given software technology are going to be. This tends to be kind of tech forward people in your firm that are really interested in the specific, like have ownership over the problem you're solving. And what you can do is provide additional training so that they can actually help their teammates with enthusiasm adopt the new technology and work with it. And this is a really great, this works really well also just for organizationally to kind of develop and promote talent, but it also really helps you make sure that you have a smooth implementation from the kind of front line. So it's a really critical part of it. And I'll leave you with one kind of final flavor of how the modern AI has come into this. And Leo's going to talk even more intelligently than I can about hallucinations, but of course they're front of mind for anyone who is working with new AI solutions. And the one thing that I'll say on that before I hand it over to Lior is that I would think if you're implementing a generative AI solution, you are going to eventually run into some kind of hallucination, although and we'll talk about it, are getting better and better at mitigating them. I would think about any generative AI solution as kind of the most enthusiastic, smartest teammate you had who needs more experience in order to kind of not start making errors. So just in the same way that you need to train people not to make errors, you need to also train AI not to make errors. It's not just going to come out of the box um, completely perfect. And so that kind of push-pull process is really useful, and having a long-term thinking about being able to reduce those over time, much in the same way that you expect a person to reduce their errors over time, is really critical. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lior to talk a little bit more in depth about the technical side of this.
Thanks, Zach. Those were some really interesting and important topics. A lot of what you touched on connects directly to what I wanted to talk about as well. So, hi everyone, I'm Lior Magen, the data science team lead at Daro. I've been working with AI and data technologies for over 12 years across several startup companies. And basically, the combination of AI and large-scale data is really my bread and butter. So today I want to share a few ideas I believe are especially important when thinking about legal technology and the ways it can move the industry forward. There are three themes I'll cover: being proactive instead of reactive, detecting risks early, and making litigation smarter through better use of data. One of the biggest opportunities in legal tech, in my opinion, is basically shifting the mindset from reacting to legal problems to actually finding them early, sometimes even before anyone reports them. In many areas of law, identifying violations is extremely hard. Attorneys often need to wait for clients to bring in a case or for a news story to break before they can take any action. But with the right tools, that doesn't have to be the case anymore. We can use AI and large-scale data to surface potential issues before they even grow. I'll give you an example. Environmental violations. This might include companies dumping waste illegally, releasing harmful chemicals into the air, or polluting water supplies. These are serious issues. They affect people's health and damage the environment, and in too many cases, they go unnoticed for too long. This is especially true in under-resourced areas, where communities simply don't always have the means to understand the source of health issues, or they can take any legal action. But the data is often out there, hidden in public records, environmental reports, satellite images, or medical data. The biggest challenge in this case is simply connecting the dots. And this is where technology can really shine. By mapping, filtering, cleaning, and analyzing large data sets, we can help legal teams spot violations early and take action without waiting for someone to knock on their door. And while I gave an environmental example, this same idea applies across many domains, from employment law to data privacy, finance, and many more. Closely related to that is early risk detection. Basically, the ability to identify legal risk before they escalate into something bigger. And why is this important? So first, from a justice perspective, it helps stop harm from spreading. But also from a business perspective, being early matters. Take mass torts as an example. If you're late to the game, it becomes harder and more expensive to get involved. Early detection helps legal professionals act at the right time. The tools we use today are getting better at this. AI can scan large volumes of data, highlight trends, flag things that don't look right, and basically the speed and scale of that analysis is the game changer. After that said, I must add that human judgment still matters. One of the biggest lessons I've learned working in this space, and I must say like in many other spaces as well, is that combining AI with human expertise is where the real value happens. Machines can process fast, accurate in scale, but eventually people understand nuance. So keeping a human in the loop is key to using AI in a smart and reliable way. The third theme I want to touch on is making litigation smarter, not just faster. And that comes down to using high quality data in the right way. Litigation decisions are only as good as the information behind them. If your data is outdated or inconsistent or unverified, your strategy suffers. A lot of focus goes to the tech side of AI tools, but in my view, data ownership and validation is just as important. It's not enough to rely on third-party data or even, I don't know, like open data from the web and assume it's correct. You have to check it, you have to clean it, and make sure it fits your use case. One example is legal settlement data. You might have a document that a vendor says includes a settlement amount, but until you actually verify that with your own tools or processes, you cannot rely on it. That verification step makes all the difference. Another major opportunity is using historical legal data more effectively. We can now track how specific actions, filings, motions, judge assignments, basically how they impacted outcomes in the past. And that allows us to guide future strategy more precisely. The smarter your data, the smarter your litigation. Now, before I wrap up, I want to say a few words about how we evaluate AI tools in legal tech, because not all the tools are built the same. There's a lot of excitement out there, and it's easy to get caught up in the buzz. But for legal work, accuracy and reliability aren't optional. They're critical. So how do you separate the useful tools from the noise? At least in my experience, the strongest tools come from teams that combine deep technical knowledge with real legal domain expertise. And you cannot build something meaningful for lawyers without understanding how legal work actually happens. And finally, one of the biggest risks in working with AI, especially large language models, as Zach already said, is something we call hallucination, which you probably already heard of. This is when a model gives you an answer that sounds great, but it's just wrong. It might confidentially cite a case that doesn't exist or give you a fake link that goes nowhere. The thing is that LLMs are trained to give you satisfying answers, not necessarily correct ones, even though they are working really hard to make it better. So as legal professionals, you need to remember, right? You're the legal professional. You must remember that you are always responsible for validating the output. There are technical ways to reduce hallucinations, like using strong reference models and applying validation layers, but mindset matters too. Use AI as a tool, not as a final authority. And to close, I want to briefly introduce a tool that I've been involved in building. It's called Torch. Torch is not just another chatbot or a legal assistant. It's designed as a research companion, built to support the full legal research workflow. It lives inside your browser, so it's there with you wherever you're working. And instead of stopping after giving you one answer, Torch sticks with you as your research evolves. Some of the features we built are things like we have a side panel with contextual memory, the ability to retrace your steps, memos and folders to help you organize your thinking, and I think that most importantly, answer that comes with real checkable references. Remember hallucinations. The goal was to build something that's fast, accurate, and practical, something that legal professionals, exactly as the ones that we have in-house at Darrow, can actually use in their day-to-day work. And that's exactly what Torch is. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the session.
All right. Thank you, Lior, and thank you, Zach. This was really interesting, and it's such a joy to be your colleague. And with that, I think that we're just going to move to Q&As, and we already have a question that we received before the webinar. And Zach, I think you'll be the right person to answer. What's one mistake that you see lawyers make most often when it comes to adopting new technology, and how can they avoid it?
Yeah, so I think the big mistake is really getting kind of trapped in these sort of hyper buzz cycles where you're really looking at, okay, this is new, so I have to have it, versus actually orienting around a real problem within your workflow. What that tends to end up happening is that you get these like really big hype cycles followed by collapse and a lot of skepticism. And I think neither is the right position to take when you're looking at new technology. You really need to think about what are the use cases? What are the problems that I can solve with this realistically? And how can I keep making my team more efficient in what I'm doing? So it's not going to solve every single thing. It's not going to be the like buzziest, coolest thing. It's going to be how can I keep pushing forward using technology to the best of its possibilities while being aware of its limitations.
Cool. A follow-up question would be, how should a law firm balance between buying one all-in-one, one-stop shop solution versus building their own tech stack? And I think sort of like a second layer to this question would be, do you have a different answer to different law firms? So if I'm a small legal tech, do I need to pick and choose and build my own versus if I'm a big
Mhm.
legal tech or a big legal, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think for the all-in-one solution, like what you're really balancing here is that a smaller point solution, like an individual tool, is going to solve that problem really, really well. Whereas an all-in-one solution is going to give you a lot of breadth, but probably is not going to be as deep on any specific thing. So every firm's going to have its own biases. I think it depends a little bit on how tech forward you want to be strategically. Um, but I tend to think of you should be looking for individual solutions for the deepest, biggest problems that you have, and then try to find ways that those can plug into kind of more general solutions. But like really, um, a larger firm is going to have the ability to kind of manage both. A smaller firm, I think you need to be really, really thoughtful and don't try to just cover every single thing that you do, and instead kind of really stay focused on what are the core challenges that you have, because you don't need to automate everything. If you're working, a lot of these tools are really to help you manage scale. And if you're not operating at massive scale, you don't necessarily need the tools that are going to help you operate at massive scale. You should be looking for the things that are dragging down your time as much as possible, and automate those things.
Cool. Thank you, Zach. The next question is going to be for you, Lior. With AI advancing super quickly and really being all around us, and different occupations getting the, oh, you're not going to be relevant with AI around, what skills do you think lawyers need to focus on today to stay relevant and sharp tomorrow?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think the most important thing is learning how to think critically about AI outputs. It's really not about knowing how the model works under the hood, like the technology, but it's about knowing how to ask it the right questions and, just as important, how to question the answers it gives you. So I'd say lawyers should focus on learning how to ask AI the right questions and on building a verification mindset. Don't take things as face value, always check them. And one more thing, I think it's really important to use tools that are trained for legal work, not
Mhm.
just general purpose AI.
Cool. And then the inevitable question, is AI going to replace lawyers?
Definitely. No, I'm kidding. Um, so no, I mean, at least the short answer is no, but it will definitely change the way lawyers work. AI can already do a lot of things really well. It can sell through large data sets, as I already said. It can draft text, summarize case law, all of that. But those are just the technical parts of the job. What it can do is the human side, things like building relationships, earning trust, making judgment calls based on empathy, ethics, or experience. That's where lawyers actually bring the real value. So no, AI won't replace lawyers, at least for now, but it will replace the tasks, repetitive ones, time-consuming ones, and that's actually a good thing. It's a false multiplier and not a threat.
Cool. Zach, Lior, thank you. To our audience, thank you for making the time and joining us today. And would love to see you in future Darrow webinars. And if you have any questions that come to your mind, in an hour, in a few hours, tomorrow, feel free to email them to us. We're at contact@darrow.ai, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.